What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, back from vacation, refreshed, ready to hang, bringing you episodes after episodes after episodes. So much fun stuff coming up that I cannot wait to share with you. So the guest this week is Dan Smith. He is a tattoo artist for a shop called Captured Tattoo here in Orange County, California, Tustin to be more precise. And he's also fronted a lot of different bands called Dear and Departed. He also played in a band called Day of Contempt. He also was on a reality television show called LA Inc. I think it was on the Learning Channel. Can't remember exactly. It's been a few years, but he is a very interesting individual. More on him in a minute. We'll dive into the intricacies of the episode after this. So let's get some business out of the way. First and foremost, so I think in order for this show to become like the most legit it possibly can be, it needs a Wikipedia page. Don't ask me why I get these weird things in my head, but I'm just like, you know what? It would be awesome to have a Wikipedia page based around the show. And realistically, as much as I would like to do it myself, that's a little cheesy. The host of the show putting together his own Wikipedia page, that sounds like egotistical, self-aggrandizing, I don't know, something. So I need your help. So for those of you that are fans of the show or just casual fans checking occasionally, you know, Wikipedia is a collective thing. So how about we build a Wikipedia page for the show? If you do it, if you start it and start to post some content on there, email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. I will send you a thank you gift. It's a small token of my appreciation, but I will send something to you. So there's a challenge. Go out there, start a Wikipedia page, email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. We'll talk. I'll get you something fun. And for those of you that are on the YouTubes, we have I think I've got like 50 some odd shows up there. So I'm slowly getting some of the old shows up on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, awesome. Thank you. A lot of people listen to stuff, music, and other things on YouTube. So we are there. Go to the website 100wordspodcast.com. And then on the right hand of the page, you'll be able to see a link to the YouTube page. Got to mention some kind people giving reviews on iTunes. Thank you very much. It makes the show legitimate in that fashion. So Matty _Who, he's in the States, said, by far my favorite podcast. I'd like to see his other podcasts. I want to see what he's basing this off of before I get too excited, but thank you, Matty. I appreciate it. And then Landmark from Baltimore. He says, great reliving memories and getting to know what people are up to today. Thank you. I appreciate that. PropertyofZach.com, our media partners. Go to the website, find out about the latest and greatest in independent music. The podcast has a website, obviously, 100wordspodcast.com. Visit that. So one little thing before I talk about Dan and to Dan, I was on vacation, and it was one of those things where the internet was so atrocious at this home that we were staying at that I checked out, was on the computer a little bit. I did some emails, did some keeping up with the news, but relatively speaking, I was pretty pulled back. And it's one of those things where if a news tidbit or story comes about and you miss it, it doesn't matter. Like that's ultimately the conclusion I came to, where it was so many of these quote unquote huge news stories that you miss in a day because you're, hiking, playing golf, doing whatever. It was so nice to not care about that for a week and to be able to like really pull the plug and disconnect. Everybody needs that. Everybody feels so connected, and that's obviously a cool part about our world, but you do have to declutter the brain. You do have to step away for a period of time in order to make you feel excited to keep up with whatever's happening in the world, because the more you keep up with stuff, the duller your senses get. At least that's what I've noticed. So I know it sounds very, I wouldn't say trivial. It sounds very common sense to like, oh, hey, unplug. But just fucking do it. Stop listening to this podcast, pull away. Actually, don't stop listening to the podcast. Wait till the very end, then pull away, unplug, just chill out. Don't post on Twitter for 24 hours, something. Whatever it is your digital crutch, step away from it. Put the phone down, that there are things that we can do. So I encourage you to do that for a moment. So anyways, Dan Smith, he's a man of many talents. But I mean, he's an amazing tattoo artist and has done a lot of cool stuff in his life, has taken the plunge and opened his own shop. It's been open for just over a year. It's an amazing space. So he invited me down there one day to hang out in one of his back offices and be able to chat. And it was cool because I could tell that he hadn't done an interview like this in quite some time that kind of hit on his music life, hit on his tattoo life, hit on his origins because he's born in New Zealand and people only know like 2 things about New Zealand, so we were able to kind of peel away some of those stereotypes. But it was a great chat. I was really, really thankful for him to be able to invite me over and just be able to coordinate this, because he's a busy dude. He has a slam-packed schedule. So for him to kind of, take an hour of his day to just do this with me was very meaningful. So I appreciate it, Dan. And without further ado, here is my discussion. Talk to you afterwards.
You were standing in the sunshine. I really thought you were the beast. Something stood behind the shadows. I stared it down in disbelief. How could I know I hate you?
So I'm going to take you back to, it had to have been like 2004, 2005, maybe even a little bit, because when did you move to the States?
2004.
Okay, then it was around that time. Because I think I met you for the first time when you were living in like that sort of storage. It was not a storage unit, but like
It was a warehouse.
A warehouse.
Yeah.
Right. And it was, I can't remember why it was over. I think it was maybe in like the Cancer Back guys or something like that. I don't know. So we've had a million mutual friends, but I just remember meeting you and was immediately like, okay, like you're on the level. I was already aware of your presence beforehand, as far as like, oh, Dan, like, you know.
Cool.
But it was one of those things where it was like, you just, the grind you seemed to be on, like you were just so focused, but at the same time, like casual about it. I don't know. It's this weird, like, maybe it's just the whole like laid back, whatever, New Zealand, Australian, England, like that mentality, because it doesn't, I'm sure you get stressed.
Yes.
But,
correct.
Right. But the impression that you always seem to leave, and maybe it's just the people that are like in your immediate closeness know like how you can freak out, but you just seemed like even keeled in a situation that was not ideal in regards to living in a warehouse with 6 other dudes.
Right. Yeah. As far as that whole thing went, it was just what we had to do, or what I had to do to survive. You know what I mean? I left home pretty young.
Right.
In New Zealand, 17, I was sort of already doing my own thing.
Right.
And I moved to Australia in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as long as I can remember, I don't know. I don't know if I really got taught that, but I knew that I had to do as much as I could at all times,
right.
Whatever it takes, because I feel like life's there to do that. If you're not, then you kind of just wasting air and taking up someone else's space.
You let it happen. Yeah, you let it happen. You let life happen to you as opposed to trying to dictate it. You can never plan.
Well, no, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I did let life happen somewhat, but being from New Zealand and growing up, that's a small country,
Right.
And having so much influence from other countries,
mm-hmm.
I feel like, I talk to it to people who have left New Zealand, or other people that have traveled a lot, or done whatever as well, that you either are totally fine staying there,
mm-hmm.
or you want to leave.
Okay.
You know what I mean? There's not really anyone in the middle like, oh, I might go overseas for a year. It's like, you want to get out, and because you know why, because you're in a small country that doesn't have...
There's more to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you just... I'm here, and that's what I'm doing.
It's beautiful here, right?
And to be honest, that just being super comfortable in that really gave me a lot of anxiety as a kid. I felt like I needed to get out and do my thing.
Spread your wings.
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess it was music. I guess it really was the lyrics of a lot of the bands that we grew up listening to. Those bands were your education, you know what I mean?
That was like your window to another world.
Totally,
totally.
And I still feel the same way. It's like you can't ever explain to anyone what exactly that does to you. People have touched on it. There's obviously there's bands that are more outspoken about that, but unless you don't really get it.
It's hard.
So, I had a couple friends who did a lot of early traveling, who came over here and ended up touring with bands, with like Madball and One King Down and Shutdown, and the older group of friends that I grew up with in New Zealand. They were in basically New Zealand's first hardcore band. A whole bunch of them ended up moving to New York.
Okay.
My friend Ben ended up playing for Snapcase. Reese ended up playing with Roger Murray. Everybody was just in it. And I was back in New Zealand working delivering overalls and dirty rags, towels and shit
Right.
to mechanics and stuff, like waking up at 5 a.m. just to be done by 3 or 4 so I could go to the tattoo shop and get tattooed.
Right.
Just so jealous.
Yeah.
Just
Well, yeah, because you see that trajectory of what they did, and you're just like, that's where it's aspirational. You're like, that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, in reality, they were just doing there what we were doing down there.
Sure.
It wasn't. But when you're a kid, I mean, it's kind of like everything's major.
Oh, yeah.
You get older and you're kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
Nothing is really that major anymore, but
Right.
it's still cool, like yeah. So
Yeah. So but because you were born in the UK, right?
born in the UK in a real industrial town in the northeast called Middlesbrough.
Okay.
Um,
And what was your family structure like growing up? Like mother, father?
yeah. Still together.
Sure.
Sister, everything's good. Normal family.
Mhm. Is your sister younger or older?
She's younger, 3 years
Okay.
younger.
Okay.
Yeah. So we left England in '87.
What precipitated that move? Like, how come? 'Cause that's a pretty big shift from the.
It's a big shift, but it was around that time there was a couple huge waves of people leaving
Okay.
to New Zealand because it's in the Commonwealth.
Oh, that's right.
You know
That's
what I mean?
right.
So it's a pretty similar way of living over there. I mean, aside from like the cultural aspect,
right.
obviously same language, same
Yeah.
food, humor. It's all pretty similar.
Right.
So yeah, my family moved. They just wanted a better life for me. England's a tough place now more so than ever, but back then they kind of saw it coming and
They saw the limitations.
yeah,
of that. Okay.
and I think obviously things would be a lot different if we stayed there.
Uh-huh. What were they doing for work?
My mum's always been a teacher and a counselor,
Okay.
and my dad was working for the newspaper. He used to work in the newspapers for a long time, but
Mm-hmm.
as it goes, computers end up taking over everything, and
It did. Yeah.
so yeah, we didn't have a lot of money, but we had sort of everything that we thought we needed at the time.
Sure.
But I still knew that I had to work for everything, and I definitely, leaving home pretty early, I was faced with that responsibility pretty early.
Right. And so then when you moved down to, because you moved to New Zealand, but then you moved on your own to Australia, right?
Yeah, I moved in
Okay.
2001 after a couple visits to join a band there. That's the band that we ended up coming here with.
Right.
And
So because their formative years would have probably been mostly in New Zealand as far as like going to high school and that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because New Zealand is one of those things where it's like so many people know two things about it. They know Lord of the Rings was filmed there,
Uh-huh.
and they know Flight of the Conchords was from there. Like
Uh-huh.
that.
Cool.
But
Yeah.
it's like there's like no other knowledge besides like, oh, it's really pretty, and I think it's above Australia. Like
Yeah.
there's just no knowledge of that. Like, did you feel any sort of like national identity crisis from that perspective, or was it just like everyone's like, oh, well, we got our own thing up here, this is fine?
Well, the whole laid back comment that you said before, I think,
Right.
I mean that's
That kind of describes it.
yeah. I mean people are so laid back there, and
Yeah.
and everybody's. New Zealand has definitely a really strong sense of pride
Mm.
for doing things differently and right. You know what I mean? Like it's a pretty green country, and
Right.
it's pretty progressive in a lot of ways. But like any country, it's got its problems. It's any smaller country, it's
Sure.
it's the same. But
Right.
yeah, I mean,
So you started to be like culturally exposed. What were you being exposed to down there?
well, just the history of the country. The Captain Cook actually was born in the town that I was born in England.
Oh, wow.
He founded New Zealand.
Okay, yeah.
So it was kind of, it was.
Historically cool, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, not that I was taking his path or anything like that, but it was like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just I was aware of it, and then obviously when I became a little older and I was aware of tattoos, that was something that is obviously very apparent in New Zealand.
Is the
Tattooing
tattoo-
in cultural aspects. Yeah.
Sure. So tattooing that's pretty well. I guess known down there. I mean, like that's a pretty part of.
Oh,
pretty
for
big-
sure.
Okay.
Huge part. Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, it's pretty much aside from Samoa, it's one of the islands down there in the Pacific that is most known for tattooing.
Interesting. Because usually it's like the
the correlation that obviously you can draw between, you know, being a musician and being into music and tattooing, like that's an easy link to put together.
Yeah.
The thing that I've always found interesting is like, because obviously tattooing as a subculture has always been, you know, on the outside. I mean, now it's difficult to put into context because you're just like, oh yeah, everybody has a tattoo. Like,
yeah.
But it's, you know, it's always been on the fringe. And so it's interesting to hear that New Zealand had such a, you know, large history with that and attracted you to it.
Yeah, it was something that was pretty intimidating as well, though, you know, especially because I wasn't born there.
Right.
I felt like, you know, I mean, the pride and they call it mana in Māori, is so, I mean, such like a huge thing that I didn't want to ever impose on that either. You know what I mean? I felt like I was kind of an import living in a crazy great place, but it was, you know, you had to show
the respect for it before you really got quote unquote let in. I'm sure
100%.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, like,
it kind of sounds like the like obviously how Hawaii is in regards to like surfing and like locals only and that sort of like mentality where it's like you need to prove yourself before like you get kind of let in.
Yeah, it was a much different time back there, and it's not even to say that I'm not even trying to say, you know, speak from like an old guy point of view, you know what I mean? But in the last 15, 20 years, I mean, everything's just changed so much.
Totally. And so when you started to get into, you know, like high school and started to, can they call it high school down there?
Yes.
Okay, so make sure. Because I know there's, I mean, in England, primary and all those other things. But, so yeah, once you started getting into high school, you know, what kind of kid did you find yourself being? Like, were you, you know, were you outgoing? Did you try to play sports? Like, where did you?
I played football, soccer for, I mean, my whole childhood, you know, up to my teens, mainly because of the English connection. I mean,
it's kind of like baseball is over here.
Yeah,
you have to play a little league.
Yeah, you don't really have a choice in it. It's more like that's just what you do. It's kind of like a way of life as opposed to like, oh, let's, you know, I've got a choice of this.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I went to a really strict, kind of rough boys' school that was pretty much like maybe 70% Polynesian. So it was it was tough, but it was, you know, I found the group of kids that I needed to hang around with, and I always loved music, but once I really got into it, it was me kind of hanging out in the music room and the photography room, and you know.
Yeah. You were the art kid.
Yeah, I always did art. You know, I never really liked it, like until I found tattoos. To me, that was the one thing that kind of connected the both. Connected art and music so well that I was just like, okay, now I know what I'm doing. You know. Like doing still life pictures, like oil painting.
Right.
Back then, to me, was just the most boring thing ever.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting how you put that, because it's like I mean, a lot of people, you know, look at tattooing, and obviously there's like they may view it as having an artistic component. There's talent there,
yeah,
but it doesn't get classified with a lot of the other artistic expressions.
No,
but it's like that was your medium. You felt you're like, oh, that I identify with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is awesome.
It's a trade, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, very few people were true artists up until, I mean, the last 10 years has obviously seen it explode with people who have probably been painting their whole life thinking like, oh, this is cool. What's this? Tattoo machine. I'll try it. And then they rule in a year, you know? So it's like, you know, I love to think that I embrace everything modern and try not to put myself in the box of like, oh, you know, bitter guy.
It used to be,
because it sucks. You end up just looking like a fool, you know, really.
Totally.
You're not impressing anyone, you know. It's better to be the guy who's like gets stoked on younger kids or people who, you know, you can learn things from everyone, you know. But it is a shame to see the way things now are just very, very easy and very disposable.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And there's definitely a couple of generations of people that really it made a huge impact on their life, and it took a lot of work and a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of just traveling and doing whatever it took to get that education. And now it's almost just like, here it is. It's all there for you. You know, it was always going to go like that. You know what I mean? So it's not like I'm kind of in, you know.
Well, I think the idea is that, you know, the best word I've heard to describe all of what you're talking about is like sweat equity. Like the idea that it's like, you know, you put so much effort, and not even just like time, because someone can put, a lot of hours towards something
Mm-hmm.
and just not really be, dedicated to it. They're just doing it. But then that idea of just like really engulfing yourself in not only the culture, but like having a context for where it all comes from. It's the same thing as obviously like music, where it's like
Totally. I was just gonna say it's exactly the same.
Exactly.
Like
you get out what you put into it.
totally.
Yes.
But growing up, just trying to save, a few $100 to record on some guy who has an 8-track recorder or a 4-track recorder or whatever.
Right.
Now it's just like, oh, iPhone, cool, yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a record, go for it.
Just toss that up there. Yeah.
SoundCloud or whatever. Like,
Totally.
cool. I'm a musician and I have fans in a web store in
Right.
24 hours and.
Yeah.
But I mean, but obviously pros and cons to both sides of the fence.
Oh, totally.
You know.
And so then, as you started to navigate through high school, you
Yeah.
said it was difficult for you in the sense of it was just like tough to find the kids that you were like akin
Yeah.
to, and was it
Totally.
one of those like things you were the stereotypical idea of like you getting picked on, being like that kid is clearly like not one of us, we need to target him.
Yeah, I mean, we never really got picked on.
Okay.
That was the cool thing. It was like, I think a lot of the dudes that were the picker honors
Right.
had a soft spot for all of us. I don't know why. I think because we had like
beat to your own drum, so to speak.
we just I don't know, man. I don't know the reason really. I've thought about it before, and it's kind of like we didn't have tattoos. We didn't have anything. I mean, we had undercuts,
Right.
haircuts.
Sure.
That was probably the most extreme we could get at the boys' school without being like,
Yeah.
is that a mohawk?
Right.
Like that's a little high. We're like, no, it's just
It's just this.
Yeah.
Right. Was it a religious school as well?
no.
Okay, it's just a boys' school.
No, yeah, just a boys' school.
Very strict.
Uniforms
and everything as well?
Yes, uniforms.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that I always find that, especially the all boys component, and it being a very strict upbringing as far as the schooling is concerned. I don't think there's any other way for many people to go besides like finding rebellion at an earlier age because of that, because you're
Yeah.
so stifled.
Yeah. I mean, the thing, if you imagine every typical movie that's been made about the freaks in high school or
Right.
whatever, like it was a boys' school, so we weren't able to even like, other than drawing the names of our bands on our bags and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
or our favorite bands and stuff, like we couldn't really even express like what we were into until after school or the weekend,
Right.
And I left that school when I was 16.
Okay.
And went to a co-ed school that was just kind of known for being like completely hopeless and completely, people smoking weed at lunchtime and
Sure.
just,
We can't control this.
yeah, let them go.
Right.
So I went there for a few more months and then split. I split when I was 17 and got a job.
Uh-huh. That must have been
Screen printing.
That must have been a pretty huge. Did you actually graduate high school?
Nah.
Oh wow, that's impressive for you to.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I shouldn't use the word impressive, but that is dedication in regards to the idea of being like, all right, I'm literally out of here. Like, because was it one of those things you dropped out because you're just like, I hate this, I can't stand this, I want to start life, or like, how did that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't wait to get out of there. I
Okay.
hated high school. I
Right.
hated everything about it.
Got That caused strife at home, I presume.
A little bit. I mean, when I got it, I did work. I have work experience.
Uh-huh.
Like when you're 17 in that year,
Right.
I went to a skate shop, and then I went to a screen printer.
Okay.
And then the screen printers offered me a job, and at that time I was like, wait, I can move out of my bedroom printing these shirts,
I'm in.
hand cut descendant stencils to an actual somewhat legitimate operation.
Okay.
Yes,
Right.
I'm all about it. So
Got it.
I did it.
So you
And-
felt like you quote unquote graduated and you moved to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no looking back. I just knew I had to get out,
Uh-huh.
and at that point in time, I've been in a band for a couple of years, and
Oh, so you were playing in bands in high school.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
What was the first band that you? Well, what year did that happen, and what was the first band?
Well, my first band.
Oh
Was,
yeah, gotta have the first band.
My first band, I was probably 13 or 14, I think,
Okay.
and it was called Pomegranate.
Pomegranate. Okay.
Yeah, not pomegranate.
Right.
Pomegranate,
yeah.
which Pommy is
POMME.
slang for an English person,
Right.
and then granite is rock.
Right.
So it's English
Just
rock.
rock. Were you describing your sound as well with the name?
That was sort of secondary.
Okay.
I think that the funny kind of weird
Yeah,
name at
yeah.
the start was definitely what we were going for.
And what'd you do in the band?
I played guitar
Okay.
and sung, and typical first band stuff. I mean,
Terrible punk, terrible rock, or are you trying to...
terrible. Well, I thought it was great.
Right.
At the time,
No, I mean-
terrible. I mean, jeez.
No.
You heard the demo?
Yeah, that's right. I've heard the demo. No. Yeah, retrospectively, we can all look back on our first bands and be like, a lot of that was awful. Maybe it was obviously it was cool at the time because you didn't know any better.
Yeah, it was definitely beginner English punk that you would, you know what I mean, like influenced by, you know, the compilation punk CDs or
Okay.
tapes, you know, back then. Like,
Sure.
So You Think You're Punk,
Right.
Buzzcocks,
Perfect. Yeah,
Sex
yeah.
Pistols, Clash.
The starter
you
kit.
know.
Yeah. Perfect.
So, yeah.
And did you was that just was you playing out of band? Were you playing in the band? Was that a notion of like I really want to do this? Like I want to perform and kind of be in a band?
Yeah,
That was
I
okay.
grew up with music. My dad was a mod in England, and he brought his whole record collection over from England. And from the youngest age I can remember, I was flicking through each record, and
Yeah.
so that's where my music education comes from. Initially, was, you know,
You got you pushed off on the right foot,
totally. He was very diverse, but really the stuff I gravitated to was all the bands I mentioned. You know, a lot of New Order,
Mm-hmm.
Joy Division, a lot of the Manchester music stuff that at the time I could, even from a young kid, I could tell that there was an element of hardship to all those bands, or something I connected with that I liked punk, but to me it was the whole snotty thing was, I liked it for the age that I was at, but I think there was always, in my head I was like, there's always something, you know, there's something more to all of this.
Of course.
So when I started listening to a lot of those bands, it was kind of like, oh, this stuff's really real, you know?
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if I grew up quickly or what, but it was like,
Yeah, it sounds like
I
you had a
just-
pretty
I was just attracted to that stuff a
Right.
lot more, you know, stuff that told a bit more of a story than like, you suck, this sucks.
Yeah, everything sucks, right.
You know? Great record.
Yeah. But, so yeah, once you
yeah.
started off on that foot, then you kind of always had that in your head, like you wanted to play in a band.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. So then my next band was called DSM.
Oh, okay.
We were in the photography class, and me and two other friends approached another friend and said, hey, we're going to start a band.
Nice.
And he cracked up and was like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, what's it going to be called? Dexter, Schneider, and Mo? And we're like, yeah.
Yeah. Let's shorten that.
Yeah, DSM. You just named it, like, and that stuck, you know. And
Yeah.
we ended up, doing some tours, and we went to Australia. We put out a couple records, and
Oh, that's great.
we ended up supporting a bunch of bands that came down. Wunking Down, VOD, Sick
Oh
and
wow.
Roll.
Okay.
So that was really the first taste of like, you know,
Yeah.
what,
Independent
what
punk and
became-
hardcore.
yeah.
Right.
yeah.
And I'm sure too. There's always a novelty in regards to like when bands start from a certain area, where it's like, oh, if you're a New Zealand hardcore band, you'd be like, oh, dude, did you hear there's a band from New Zealand? Like
Yeah.
once the word starts to travel, it's definitely that interesting. Like, oh, dude, there's a band from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Like
Yeah.
all these unexpected places.
Yeah. I mean, there was literally a handful of bands.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like I said, like when I left high school and really found music and an actual scene, it was more just like, cool, this is me now,
Right.
you know, and
you were also, while you were pursuing music, you were obviously also dedicated to tattooing. Like you were.
I was getting tattooed from a young age.
Right.
But I was very apprehensive to even let the people who I was hanging around, who I was very lucky to hang around, know that that's what I was thinking about or wanted to do. Like I never ever thought I was good enough.
Okay.
And the whole respect thing was very much in my mind, and I was just kind of like, what are you doing? You can't do that. Like, it's crazy, you know?
So you in your head were like, I want to do this, but then you were also having another conversation of like, nah, that's not realistic.
Yeah. Well, I'd drawn logos since I was a kid. I'd drawn skate logos and band logos
Sure.
and whatever on people's bags and jackets, and I was, I would stud jackets
so
in
you-
garages, and I was the guy.
You would be
know?
the guy.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, Dad, I need
Yeah.
this drawn on my leather jacket. Here you go.
Yeah.
And you would do it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Exactly. So I just, I got tattooed a whole lot, and that was kind of my education, and then eventually, obviously, they found out that I wanted to
Learn.
sort of get into it. But there were, Dean, who I met when I was young and did my first tattoo, he was straight edge, he was vegan. You know, this is like 97, 98.
Okay.
You know, so the biggest influence and role model I could have ever asked for at that age in my life, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if I didn't meet him, I don't know. It would have been, I doubt I would have been doing a lot of the stuff that I've done.
Totally. Yeah, you hit, like, a person or a thing or something, even if it's a person that, like, you don't even know.
Yeah.
Like, but you identify so closely with their art. Yeah. It's like a pinball. You just hit, you just go in a complete different direction.
Yeah.
It's like a different positive direction where you're just like, oh, I don't know where I would have been if it wasn't for that thing or that person. Yeah. So basically, you were just working, you know, doing whatever to supplement you learning about tattoos and you touring, right?
Yeah, I was working every day and, like I said, delivering overalls and mats and towels to these huge businesses and mechanics and some sketchy places too, you know, just like shitty places that ended up being pretty good because a lot of those guys wanted tattoos. So I would start at 6. I would have to drive an hour to get there every morning. I would work till I could basically leave when I finished
finish your route. Yeah.
So I would just try and finish it as soon as possible to be able to go to these guys when they knock off work at 4 or 5 to go to their houses or wherever after work to tattoo these guys for free. You know?
Right. You were doing networking without even really knowing you were doing.
Yeah. And I went to some crazy places. Like, looking back now, I'm like, how I didn't get killed, I don't.
Because they would say, like, meet at this.
Well, I went to some like clubhouses and some gang members like places and stuff, and just remember taking hours and hours doing like a rose on a chest, just sweating, just like, this is...
Dude, that's like trial by fire.
Yeah. So, you know...
Because I'm sure you were like, if I screw up, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
I'm sure you weren't even thinking that.
I wasn't, and I don't even understand why I wasn't. But, like, it all worked out, you know. They could... You know, the guys who I learned from, they could see that, and I love those guys more than anything. And
of course.
They were very, very helpful, and...
Well, I'm sure what they saw in you was obviously, like you were saying earlier, in regards to when you identify a young person that kind of not only has the drive, but then the willingness to, like, learn, you know? Because I definitely think there's a component of people that are younger that don't feel like they can, like, they don't look up for advice or whatever. They're just kind of like, out there. They're like, oh, I can't. I know everything. I've watched some YouTube tutorials or whatever. Like,
yeah. I mean, when you're a kid and everything's awkward, you know, you're never comfortable or confident with anything, you know.
Right.
And it's great if you can muster the courage to be able to ask questions and find out things, and you know, I feel like that's the only thing you can do, right?
Totally.
Otherwise, you just like, what are you doing?
Right. You're just. I mean, you're acting like you are an expert at something when you clearly aren't. Like, just based off of not only probably your age, but the time you've invested into it as well. It's like, you probably don't know what you're doing yet.
Yeah.
And so then, so Dave Contempt was your first real sort of, I guess internationally recognized musical project.
Yeah.
Were you in it since the inception of the band?
No.
Okay.
No. There was a lot of different members, but
okay.
My first or the second band went over to Australia and did a tour, and I met those guys, and I think Australia was a really good stepping stone. You know, a lot of Kiwis end up moving to Australia. Basically, it's bigger and there's more people, and you can, you know, if you're playing music, you can play to more people. If you're doing
I'm sure it's like
more people. You know, so
totally. I'm sure it's like the LA where it's like, oh yeah, we moved from the small town here. We got to go to LA or New York. That's Australia.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of really knew that I wanted to do that. And the other thing with the guys at the tattoo shop, it was a studio. It was a sort of a word of mouth, more of a private place, you know. So it wasn't like a walk-in, place or anything. So they couldn't give me a job. There wasn't a client, you know. There wasn't like a clientele that was waiting for me or anything. So I knew that I had to go and get into a regular day-to-day street shop,
right?
You know. And so I thought, if I move to Australia, I can do that. That band also said that I could play with them if I moved or whatever, and it was just kind of like, let's try it out.
I can put these two things together.
Yeah. So that was kind of the next step, and it was great because I moved to a town called Adelaide, and it was a pretty small town, but the hardcore and punk scene was huge, and there was a lot of kids that wanted tattoos that were popular back then, and
Yeah.
just kind of no one to do them really.
Right.
So I got there. I tattooed out of my house for a while, and ended up meeting a guy called Shep, who was also, he was more like a cross punk kind of dude, and amazing tattooer, and he really got me in the door.
Sure. I always find it interesting when people kind of step into a time and a place, like they fill a certain void.
Yeah.
That's like, especially.
Oh man, him and Dean,
Uh-huh.
I have everything to thank. Like I have them to thank for everything.
Right.
It was perfect timing. It was perfect timing. So,
And for you to be able to step in from the, hey, I've got some experience, and then all of a sudden there's all these people I have access to.
yeah, just from playing in the band,
Right.
Which is just another reason why I'll always like love music and love what it's brought me, because it helped everything.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like if you cut that out of the equation, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
It wouldn't have happened the same at all. So
No, it's cool, and it's cool too because it's like you have the benefit now of being involved, obviously, in two subcultures, music and obviously tattooing. But it's always interesting when it's like when you meet people that whatever get into music or some sort of subculture without the same sort of like touchstones that you're used to, where it's like using straight edge as an example, where it's like when a person like that's 22 years old is like, oh, I got into straight edge because of this, but then it's like they've never heard of like Minor Threat. Like you're just like, you're like, how does that even happen? Like that's it's mind blowing,
I feel like it's in the last like 2 or 3 years that I've become really apparent that like things have really changed, or I'm just like, maybe I can consider myself old now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I tattoo a lot of kids and a lot of younger straight edge kids, and it's cool. It's
Totally.
awesome. But then I want to try to relate to them, like. So
you
and it's just like
right.
nah. Oh, who's that?
Yeah,
Like,
Gorilla
I'm
Biscuits,
like,
right?
Oh God.
Yeah, no, totally. It's like from our perspective, it's terrifying because we're just like, wow, are those bands and experiences going to be lost to like our generation? But then on the other hand, it's like, it's kind of cool that they're having their own thing, but hopefully that thing that they're building off of is solid enough. It's not just like, oh, this band that was like straight edge for a year and that was like they're super influential. It's like, really? I don't know about that.
Yeah. I just tattooed this kid Trent from Australia. He's in this band Relentless. Have you heard that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was so rad because I definitely saw a lot of myself in him, and he hung out the whole day. The whole situation was basically very similar to the way I remember doing things. Like, I'm flying out tomorrow, so I have one day. I stayed an extra day to get a tattoo somewhere, and I don't know how I'm gonna get back to this place tonight, but I'm just here and I'm doing it. So he hung out the whole day, and it was cool, man. It was like it made me kind of think back to those times, and
made you reminisce, I'm sure.
Yeah, and he was like, I was like, so how did you get into it? He's like, Strife were a huge influence on me being straight edge, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's cool, that's rad.
Yeah, it's great, right?
I was like, I think in '98 or whatever, we flew. Me and 11 friends, the only 11 friends probably,
sure,
in the whole, probably North Island that were aware of Strife, flew to Sydney, Australia because they were playing there to see them,
Right.
And he was just like, oh man, you went to that show? I'm like, yep.
You're like, yep, that was
a
legendary.
big deal for me back then. So, I mean, it's rad that it's blowing your mind now.
Yeah. Once you started to, plant your roots there in Australia and obviously tour out more, when was it one of those things that when did you first start to feel that like things were becoming, I guess, more real for the band? Was it when you guys started to make an impact here in the States, or was it like, I know you never made a huge impact here, but you were able to tour over here and like,
going back to the comment I said, like if you're from like a smaller country, especially something that's a place that's not disconnected, but almost, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
even
remote,
back then,
sure.
Australia was fairly disconnected from here. There were very few bands that would go and tour there.
Again, it was always, honestly, from my perspective, it was always a novelty. Because it was like, when you had a band that toured here from Japan, from anywhere, I mean, even to lesser of a degree, like Europe, you were always just kind of like, your calling card isn't the fact that you're a good band. Totally. You're from Australia, dude. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. I totally agree. We were really aware of that. That's why we made on our first tour here, we made the Motorhead, instead of Motorhead England, it said Day of Contempt Australia. You know,
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
you know, and that was out of taking advice from people here that were just like,
Totally.
oh, take
You
it,
gotta
run with
take
it,
advantage. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? But yeah, it was mainly bands that have kind of crossed over a little bit that ended up touring down there, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, towards the late '90s. Bands, I mean, Sick of It All were there in '96, I
Okay.
think, for Scratch the Surface,
Mm-hmm.
and we were too young. I mean, I was 16, so
Right.
it was like we were too young to get in. You know what I mean? We still went and you know hung out outside.
Right.
It was like whatever, and then they came back pretty regularly. So they were really the first hardcore band to go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, it was like Suicidal Tendencies.
Right. You kind of saw
You know, it was-
kind of saw what you got. Like
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
you could go to, you went.
Yeah,
And then
so
and then once you started to tour over here, was it one of those things where you were, you know, was it any sense of like culture shock for you when you toured over here? Or was it kind of like
it was basically all exciting. Every part of it was amazing to me.
of course.
You know, like I didn't have any feelings of like, oh man, I'm missing home.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I'm missing the stuff that I'm used to. It was just like, you know, whoa, I'm going to Halo Tattoos to get tattooed and meet, you know, DJ and
Right.
Grez and Adam Barton and all the dudes who tattooed those guys and did the artwork for all those records, and you know what I mean? It was like stuff like that, like, and that happened in obviously every city in different ways, or you know,
Right.
meeting guys from different bands that you've grown up loving, and then all of a sudden you're in the same room. It's like, you know, I mean, I still get that in a way, you know, not in like a fanboy way, but I think it's healthy to have that somewhat.
Totally.
As long as you're alive, you know what I mean? Because
Yep.
that stuff keeps you young.
Of course.
So
So tour. I mean, on that notion, like, so tour never was really a. I'm sure later it became more of a quote unquote grind, but it's like, I mean, touring is a difficult beast.
yeah, it got difficult for sure.
Yeah.
Everybody took that in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after, I mean, I think a year and a half in, we split.
Right.
Just because of those reasons, you know. And I feel like I was a little more aware of what it took to actually make it happen.
Uh-huh.
And you know, I mean, being in a band, you're dealing with 4 other different personalities. That some get it, some don't. Some
Totally.
you know are overexcited, some are underexcited. It's
Yeah.
just a balancing act, and
I like the way you put it though, where it's like each people react differently.
yeah, what's
Like,
life? You know what I
I
mean?
know, and
it
I
attacks
just-
you in all shapes and forms. you
Totally,
know,
but
when
like
you least
this-
expect it. So.
This shared experience that everybody is having, you know, 4 or 5 guys on the road together, each person is obviously going to take that differently, even
Yeah.
though you're all seeing the same thing,
Yeah.
generally speaking.
yeah.
And it is interesting to see how that kind of, you know, fractures because of the way that people are.
Yeah.
There's either the guy that's just gonna like stick in the van because he's like, I don't want to fucking talk to anybody.
Yeah.
There's the guy that's just gonna be like, could I ride in your van, other band that we're on tour with, because I need that break.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all a big learning curve, you know. And I don't know, man. I feel like as long as you are learning from everything, in the hope to progress and be a better person or get to a better place,
Right.
it's all good, you know.
Yeah.
But if these things happen and it forces you to kind of turn the other way and go backwards, then that to me is the biggest bum out that can happen from it.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, you feel like you kind of run into a wall and then that's it. Like that's like the
Yeah,
death
I mean,
of
there's,
whatever.
there's always a way out of everything, you know?
Yeah.
And like, not trying to be that guy, but I say that because I know, you know what I mean? Like,
Of course.
So it's when someone else doesn't have that, it's difficult to, you know, be in a van 24 hours with them.
Yeah, no, totally.
You know?
Yeah, no. Totally, because you
Because they're not going to listen to you either, really. You know?
No.
Then the animosity starts to grow, and it's
Totally.
kind of like, oh, well, you do that because that's you. But
right. Were you kind of the sort of like business guy of the band?
Not by choice.
Right. right.
Yeah, not by choice. But I mean, yeah, it was somewhat shared with someone else, but it was, yeah.
Yeah, because there definitely also has that mentality, like especially when the person becomes sort of the either by choice or by default the band representative, there becomes that element of like the guy that isn't involved in any of the business looks at you and is like why are you making me do this? I didn't
Yeah.
really want to do this show or whatever. And you're just
Yeah.
like, dude, but like here are all these reasons why we did it. Like
Yeah.
we talked about it.
Yeah,
You didn't say it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing with me always having tattooing as well was just obviously me and someone else does it. You know what I mean? It was just purely not selfish in the bad sense of the word, but it was just I could disconnect from everything else, and once I started to do pretty good from it, it was kind of like, man. You know, as much I always had my priorities straight. That the band was 100% what I was working towards, and would often float, to make it happen. But when push came to shove, it was just like, man, I don't know. It just got so unhealthy.
Totally,
people weren't happy, and people were leaving, and it was just like, all right, what are we doing?
Yeah, and then when you made the move to the States, like the big jump, like did you?
Well, this was after we moved.
Right, this was after.
This was like a couple of years after.
Right, I mean, you're referencing your time in Dear and Departed, where it was like, you were like you were saying, you were supplementing. The band was existing off of your tattooing, like as far as like the financial responsibilities, like you were funding a lot.
I was referencing both bands, but that was just. I don't know. I never thought about it. I just thought I'm able to do that, so that's what I need to do to make it happen.
Right.
You know, I definitely. I don't know. I like to think. I like to consider myself a selfless person, because I feel like you just go. You know, if you don't give what you can, then you're a dick. You know.
Yeah. Well, and I think you were also too. You were functioning out of the hope that whatever you were investing in was obviously going to like pay off from that perspective.
Exactly.
And like not from like a selfish standpoint, but just like, well, it doesn't matter what I'm doing right now, because like this hopefully will lead to something.
I felt I was lucky to be able to do that.
Right.
So I should.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right.
Was there a point? Was there ever a point where you were like, fuck this, I just need to like either move back to Australia or like I mean, was there ever that sort of like, you know, pick up your bags and like go back home, like moments?
No.
It was all just focused on. I mean,
I could have been the only one. I don't know, but I felt like I sacrificed a lot personally to make that move initially. Do you know what I mean? So I felt like it would go back on that.
Right.
I wasn't going to do that.
Sure. You're like that never. Yeah. Well, I'm sure too, because you were moving from a safe environment from your profession. You know, you're working in a shop and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To, I mean, even though you did set yourself up to be here, because you were tattooing with Jim when you first initially came over here, right?
Yeah. He was a huge reason, confirming kind of the possibility of being able to move here.
Right.
You know, like band stuff. I mean, I was somewhat realistic in the fact that, like, sure, I mean, you can get tour offers all day, but you know, whether it happens or not, that's another thing, and whether that leads to any kind of label stuff or whatever, I mean, that's another thing again. So I needed some kind of solidarity in the tattoo side of things. And Jim was amazing. I met him, I think, in 2001 or 2 when we did our first tour here, and he was just like, you know, I'll definitely try my best to make sure that you have a job anywhere that I'm at. You know, if you ever think about moving, you should, and I'll do whatever I can. So to me, that was kind of like, whoa. And then the whole music connection, Death by Stereo, as well. I was kind of like, is this kind of like the American Dean that I grew up with? Is this, you know, not really, but it's a similar thing, you know. And it was just like, rad, like,
this is an opportunity.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. I don't like losing opportunity or dropping opportunities. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it could be your last. You know, so you got to take it. You
right.
know? Maybe that's being a little naive on some occasion, but that was definitely something that was a big kind of like green light. You know, like gotta do it.
Right.
And he's from Orange County, and we just met so many people.
Right.
From touring, Throwdown.
There was enough
visions waiting through. It was just like
there's enough trust there, right?
Yeah, it was just like a cool thing that we could just like jump straight into, and we did, and it was rad.
Yeah, and something that I always admired in our conversations that we were having this, you know, fast forwarding a few years, like obviously once you were doing the, you know, LA Ink stuff, and like you were, you know, you rose to prominence in regards to the, and I'm sure you hate this term, but you know, celebrity tattooer, like, you know, that idea. But the one thing that I was always found so endearing, and honestly, it always came across to me, whether or not, you know, either you were on camera or obviously since I knew you prior to that, like you looked at the reality show as an opportunity rather than like this is my thing now. Like I am on the stage. I am going to capitalize in a way like it didn't feel. It felt just like another thing you were adding to your repertoire, as opposed to like because people can get from the reality show basis, people can get chewed up and like completely spit out. But you always seem to approach it where it's just like this is the thing I'm doing. It's weird as shit. I don't know why that I'm involved with this, but like I don't know.
Well, that eases the guilt a little bit. So thank you very much.
So you did? Did you really wrestle with guilt like as you were like either?
Oh, I mean, it was ridiculous.
Really?
It was ridiculous. Yeah.
Like when you were, was it either when you were in the middle of it or when the opportunity was kind of like presented to you?
Well, I'm a positive guy, so it's kind of like I feel like it's positivity has gotten me out of some shitty situations. So it's like when you're faced with something like that 95 or 99% of people have no idea about the inner workings of a reality show, let alone any show. You know what I mean? It's grossly manipulative. Of course. You know, it's depending on the context and what they're trying to get across. Right. But that was, you know what I mean? So I was kind of in two minds about it, where I was like, well, this is completely opposite to everything I've ever known and ever wanted to do. Right. But it's a platform to be able to educate people, to, you know, obviously it's an opportunity for the whole world to see what I do. Yep. So if I'm showing that what I do has integrity or is cool, or I'm giving light to the people that I think need that, then I felt a responsibility to be that guy, you know, because I was given the opportunity, not someone else, right? You know, and I also thought, well, if someone else gets this, they're probably gonna, you know, think it's their platform to stardom, which it's not, right? You know, so I don't want to waste the opportunity, you know what I mean? So I just tried my best to bear with it, and you know, I loved being able to wear T-shirts of people that needed it. I loved being able to do the Peter thing. I love being able to do all that stuff.
You were conscious about it. Like that's, like I said, that's what always struck me. Where it was just like, because there are opportunities like where anytime I see a person who like comes from where we have come from that has some sort of like mainstream level exposure, and they don't do something that represents themselves, like you feel like it's just a squandered opportunity. Yeah. Where you're just like, oh, why didn't you do that thing? Like, you know, like, I mean, another person that, you know, mutual friends, like, you know, Andy Hurley, where it's like, you look at what he does with Fall Out Boy, and you're just like, the guy is constantly talking about militant veganism, representing straight, like, all these subcultures, and, like, the kids that he influences because of that. It's like, it's great. Yeah. And you don't feel like he loses himself in that. Yeah. And it's like, you know, I just feel that, like, what you did was, in my mind, was representative of who you were, regardless of the circus that surrounded you. Which I'm sure it was that constant pull.
It was very, very difficult, and most people will never truly know that. But it's you know, doing something that has such a spotlight on something that you love and you know you've almost pretty much died for, right? And handing it over to a bunch of people that really don't give a shit about it, of course, other than
it's entertainment.
Yeah. Like, there's an element of that I understand, because that's the arena that it is. It's a TV show, sure. Right. But I feel like there was a lot that could have been done that wasn't. I feel like it purely comes down to the producers and the people that, you know, it comes down to the people editing it. It comes down to there's like dozens of people involved in this one thing. And, you know, obviously you film for hours a day, and they show not even an hour a week, of course. You know, so it's like they're going to cut and paste every juicy statement that you make and just put that in. So,
hey Dan, what's your storyline? Hey, let's workshop this, Dan.
So there was a real, it was, you know, I had to be very, very conscious in particular of what I would say and kind of think ahead into the future of what they would end up editing and what they would use. You know? So,
you just came. You just came at it from a very unique perspective, because I don't think a lot of people, honestly, probably put that much thought into like not only like who you are and what you're trying to represent, but then the fact that like you start to know where it's like, well, maybe I shouldn't say that because that will be used against me in an edit later.
Yeah, which they would do. Yeah, you know, they would cut and paste different completely different conversation. I'd have like a different shirt on and a different hairstyle, and then, but most people who watch it don't even see that. That's the crazy thing.
Right.
So, you know,
were you relieved when when that period, not even so much like working at that shop, but were you relieved when the show kind of went away?
I was relieved.
Sure.
I was definitely relieved. I mean, I really appreciate everything that Kat did and the opportunity and stuff, and I love her, but it got to a point where it was so toxic, but the relationship between the network and everybody, well, me and her basically, and Corey, the people who were on the show, that it was just so horrible. It was like, that stuff made me kind of old pretty quick, you know, and I knew it had to stop. So yeah, I was grateful it finished.
Yeah.
And I was also grateful that it kind of finished when it did, because there seems to have been, in the last, couple of years, a total storm of a lot of other shows, you know what I mean? That, I got to choose my client on the show. So each client I would push for friends, people in bands, people writing books, people doing great things, you know?
Sure.
And I love that about it. And I feel like people who watched it loved that too, because they were being educated.
Right.
And I didn't want to just do another loss in the family tattoo.
Yeah.
And talk about the same stuff, you know?
Totally.
Like, I'm not, I mean, obviously it comes with the job somewhat, you know, but I'm not a therapist. I can speak from the heart. I can, I've always done that.
Right.
But there's a time where it just becomes too much. So
well, and it's also that quickly became a trope. That quickly became a cliche.
Yeah.
Like in the context of those shows, where you're just like, oh, like here's a very emotionally charged story.
Yeah.
Like, hey Dan, how about you walk through this family tragedy with them?
Yeah. And it's like I've had tragedy on my own. I was like, I don't want to talk about that with you. You know what I mean? Like I understand what it's like. I don't feel. But there's people that really want that, and that's the crazy thing. So you got to really kind of choose your ground. Choose where you stand on all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's just really interesting. But I mean, yeah, whatever guilt you had about it, I absolve you of it.
No, it's not guilt.
No,
it's just kind of like.
I'm sure. I mean, guilt in the sense of, like you said, you felt your own internal pressure on what you kind of wanted to deliver, to the show.
Yeah.
Like, and then obviously, because I'm sure it was, you were excited about the opportunity when it was initially presented, with some, I'm sure some conversations in your head, but then once you started to see like what was happening with it, then that's when
I think the only guilt would be really from the fact that that I had faith in it being something a lot cooler than it was.
Right.
Faith that and it quite easily could have been.
Right. Totally. Two last things I wanted to hit on was when you taking the notoriety that you obviously received from the show and just the general awareness of you, it seemed to parlay perfectly into obviously like the shop we're sitting in now, where it's like the idea of you opening up your own shop. Was this something that you always wanted to do in regards to like having your own shop? Because a lot of people, just to present this notion, a lot of people, it's like, because now once you own a shop, you're the boss.
Mm-hmm.
No one starts off something that they're into being like, dude, I can't wait to be a boss. I can't wait to have employees. I can't wait to like worry about like, HR policies and like, stuff that is, so was that always a notion of you like, God, I can't wait to have my shop, or man, I would love to work in a cool shop. Like, where'd your head always sit with that? I mean, obviously, since you own the shop now, like, I'm sure there's desire there. But
I never ever wanted to be a boss. I don't think I am a boss. You know what I mean? The way my shop is set up is a lot different to a lot of other shops, because we just work on appointment only. So everybody here has their own thing going.
Mm-hmm.
I never ever had a plan. It was just with anything. I didn't have like a long-term plan. It was just kind of like, well, I think we should do this. I think as it was coming, opportunities were coming. It was just like yay or nay kind of thing. But as far as tattooing goes, I was in Hollywood. Obviously, the polar opposite to where I grew up in New Zealand. It's I feel like it's a great place. While depending on what you have on your plate, it's a great place.
Right.
I feel like it definitely is a place that you go and take from, and I think everybody who lives there is completely aware of that.
Very true.
so that's kind of what I wanted to do. You know, I lived down here for 5 years before I moved up there, and loved it. You know, I mean, I grew up by the beaches and mountains and everything like that. Orange County has that. The plan, if I at all had a plan, it was to come back and live here. But I never really planned on opening my own place. You know, when you spoke about the warehouse, I mean, I was tattooing out of there, so that was. Yeah. In my eyes, this is just a fancy version of that. You know what I mean?
That's so good. You're just like, essentially, shop is kind of where I set up for that particular moment. Yeah.
This place has heating and air conditioning, which is a bonus.
Right. And it was never a recording studio attached to it.
That's true. And it was never like a squat, basically, and, you know, whoever is staying there.
Right.
I mean, you know, so yeah, it's... this place allows me to do my thing.
Right.
You know, it's decorated in a way that I'm proud to, you know, let people know that that's what I'm about, and it has a feel that I think people really like, and it's just, you know, we're not in a busy part of town. We're not trying to.
Yeah. Well, no, it's cool because I mean, it definitely it matches with your personality in regards to like it's not this high octane like, you know, what, because I mean a lot of tattoo shops definitely have similarities to like a gym in regards to like the alpha male, like let's get a fucking tattoo. Like there are some of those you just walk in, you're like, that is a vibe that I personally don't subscribe to, but other people like, you know, identify with it, like but this, not only the shop but the location, like everything vibes with your personality. So like that's important.
Yeah, it is important. You know, I'm definitely very happy here, and I just love that I can do what I do in the way that I can do it here, and you know, I have a couple other guys who I work with that have definitely worked very hard to you know, get what they've got as well. So it's totally a what you put in, you get out kind of thing. You know.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, with tattooing getting so popular, there's a lot of young people getting into it. You know what I mean? And it's very disposable now. You know, so I think, you know, working hard at something for a long time is the only way to make it pay off for a longer time. Yeah. You know, and I like a career, as opposed to a phase that you're into. You know,
I love, and I also love. It really resonates with me earlier what you were saying in regards to tattooing being a trade, because you know a lot of the people that are you know, involved. I mean, especially just because the internet creates 9 million jobs that aren't even like, you're just like, that's a job. Like, okay, like updating a person's Twitter is a job. Like, it's crazy. And you do that from before. So the idea of a trade, like doing something with your hands, like building something, like that's, you know, it's kind of a bygone thing of the past, where it's just like a lot of people like don't have that either respect for it or like, oh, it's just, oh, that's cute, you're doing that.
Yeah. I think, you know, growing up around people that had done it for a long time before me was really the only way to learn that stuff, you know, and just seeing firsthand and having the utmost respect for that.
Right.
You know, like knowing that whether it was tattooers, whether it was, you know, bands, it's just, you gotta work hard.
Yeah,
you know, you gotta work hard, man.
Totally.
You don't get shit otherwise.
As simple as it is. And then the last thing I want to have is the fact that you, well, kind of two things in one, where it's like, obviously you, you know, how long have you been married now?
5.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. 6 years.
And so I'm sure, I mean, her being obviously an artistic individual as well, she completely understands and identifies with everything that you're doing.
Yes.
Which I'm sure is an important component of your relationship.
Very important. I'm very lucky to have found someone who's as understanding and supportive, and you know, as creative in their own right as she is. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there's that element of like, you know, because you have to travel so much and do all these things.
Yeah.
There's an element of logistics and her understanding, I'm sure. Like, was there any sort of navigational process as you guys were like, you know, dating, where it's like, oh, like, this is what I'm signing up for if I am being with Dan? Like, you know, did you have to...
Yeah, I mean, I think she knew what she was getting into.
Sure.
I'd already been tattooing and been, you know, touring for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We did the long distance thing for a while when she was finishing, you know, her training in Florida. She lived in Florida, so there was definitely an element of whatever it takes in a completely new world now.
Right.
You know, not band, not tattooing. It was like, you know, real life shit.
Totally.
You know, like I got to make this work because she's the one. You know.
Right. Here's this responsibility I feel.
Yeah. So, man, she's an angel. You know, she's the best. It's like
that's cool. You felt that weight on yourself though, where it's like you felt like you needed like.
Still do completely. You know.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, especially in the context of like independent music, there's that, or independent music and like any artistic expression, is the the stunted adolescence, where it's like you're allowed to be a kid for years and years and years.
Yeah.
But then it'll
get you.
Totally. But then never really kind of introducing any sort of real responsibility in your life besides feeding your own mouth. You know.
I'm really flattered that you say all these things. I don't really know if there was one single thing that happened that made me go, hey, you've kind of got to be responsible and you've kind of got to do what you got to, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is just, you can...
Adball lyrics? I don't know, maybe.
It could be. It could be some sort of thing just like sticking in there, and it's like, but yeah, I mean, I think there's something, certain people are kind of, cut out for it, where it's like you can tell that they can, sort of step up to the plate and be responsible, but then there's other people where you're just like, I'm scared for you. I don't know what you're going to do. I'm literally like...
I'm scared for you.
Right, you're going to be 35 years old and you're going to have like you were going to be doing this... Like, there's nothing wrong with doing the same stuff since you were like 15 years old, because that's, like you were saying, that's what keeps you young.
Yeah.
But, you got to have some sort of larger mentality about it. Like...
Yeah. I agree. I think between us, we've got some great friends that are role models as well.
Sure.
And as you grow old with people like that, they're teaching you as much as maybe you're teaching them and you don't even know it.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it's just that sort of like, because there is a notion of like, aging gracefully within the context of doing kid shit, where it's like, you can't look like, you don't want to, we're both in our mid-30s, being that age and like dressing like you're a 15-year-old. You're just you can't do that.
One of my old friends, Lawrence, who he lives in Atlanta now, but he's from New Zealand. He told me a long time ago that every person you meet, you learn something new about yourself.
Oh yeah.
Which I'll never forget that, and I really it's totally true. You
know?
Like if you can't meet anyone and kind of have conscious thought about something and then either make a decision or at least think about something that maybe you've done or something that you want to do that's influenced by that person, then
you're not learning.
Yeah.
You're not putting forth the effort.
Yeah. Well, you'd be a vacant person. It's just, like I meet so many people here on a daily basis, but the amount of people that I've learned from who, on paper, I probably wouldn't have thought in a lifetime that I've learned from.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. Yeah. Well, I don't think there's a better way to put a cherry on top of that as far as
cool.
I'm concerned. Well, thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it.
So that was Dan. What a nice chap, right? Just a good dude. Solid individual that continues to get better at what he does. Like, I love the determination of the craft, and I like the way that he spoke about tattooing as a craft, as the same thing as like a mechanic does, or working with your hands. I love that. Partially just because I don't have any real talent when it comes to that sort of stuff. So when I observe it in action, it's awesome to see. I love it. So email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. The producer, as always, so steadfast in his dedication to this podcast, is Tom Richfield, my best internet buddy. And visit the website, 100wordspodcast.com. Visit propertyofzach.com. And next week is a, I wouldn't say two-parter, but next week is a very special guest, Hirakesh Hirway. He is a podcaster, and he's also a musician, but he does this amazing podcast called Song Exploder, and I was just so excited that he was interested in talking to me. There's that episode, and then there's an episode after that that's extremely exciting as well. There's so much fun stuff. Basically, what I'm doing now is I'm finding these people in different areas of media and entertainment that have some connection to punk rock, hardcore, whatever you want to call it, independent music, and want to talk to me about that. It's so cool because there are people that you would never expect in certain walks of life. They got the music inside of them and not just like, oh yeah, I'm kind of into it. It's like, no, they are tuned in. Until next week, be safe, everybody.
Thank God.